Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming and joining for the Getting Started with Sourdough workshop with Allegheny Mountain Institute. We are an educational nonprofit working to cultivate healthy communities through food and education. We strive to meet our mission through a three-pronged approach, which includes an 18-month tuition-free farm and food system fellowship, institutional support for schools and hospitals through integrating farming, nutritious food, and related education, and regional networking to build food system that nurtures our bodies, our environment, and our economy. I am Sarah Spinner. I'm a community fellow, and I'll be hosting today's workshop. I'd like to remind you that this is being recorded and will be posted onto our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, feel free to turn your video off. Also, everyone is currently on mute. So if you have any questions, please utilize the chat box. I'll be monitoring it throughout the workshop. And we'll also have some time at the end for any follow-up questions. And now I'm going to pass things over to one of my fellow community fellows, Hannah. She's going to be going through all the steps you need to get started making your own sourdough bread. So yeah, I'll pass it over to her.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Is the sound okay? Yay, thumbs up here. So hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a community fellow based here at the Mountain Farm. I'm the Farm and Fellowship Coordinator, so I work on both the farm operations side of managing and planning and running our farm, and I also work on the fellowship side with coordination and curriculum and kind of acting like as a RA type figure for incoming fellows. So quick plug, our deadline to apply for our fellowship is tomorrow. So if you or anyone else is interested who would love to be a fellow, please apply today. We are so excited for this next new cohort. And then joining me today is my housemate and fellow community fellow, Jamie Rudd. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm the Outreach and Equity Coordinator up here on the Mountain Farm, also supporting some of the fellowship work, but also doing a lot of work around food access in Highland County. Happy to be here helping Hannah today.
Yeah, so we're here for sourdough. Exciting. It's the best. Everyone tried it at the beginning of quarantine. So now we can get to it and learn about it. It's gonna be exciting. So yeah, I am just full disclaimer, I'm like a sourdough newbie. There is like a deep sourdough subculture that I am not a part of. So that's one thing that's been really, really helpful about the fellowship, especially during phase one for me, was the opportunity to grow and explore and to just try out all my different interests and passions and being in a community with people who are super passionate and come with a lot of experience. I was especially influenced by the fellows who were in my position, Matt and Lola. They were like sourdough aficionados, and by watching them and learning from them, I really learned a lot. During our 2-month break, I took the time, and I had a lot of time, and I took the time just to like really learn. And I was like baking sourdough every single day, and it's just become a really fun, relaxing activity for me. And it's also great. Jamie and I live an hour and a half away from the nearest full-service grocery store and bakery. So for us, making bread is a way both to like feed ourselves and have like a fun creative outlet, but it's also almost out of necessity. So yeah, so I mostly learned from watching my other fellows, doing a lot of reading, and like every other millennial, YouTube and the internet. It's been such a gift to have like videos of people showing you what to do and techniques. So I hope that I can share this with you. So today, as part of the demonstration, I'm going to walk you through all the steps from feeding your starter to making a whole loaf of bread. It's going to be a whirlwind. We're going to have fun, but I'm sending out lots of resources for you guys to take advantage. So yeah, we'll get started. One more caveat, during this demonstration, I'm going to try and have a whole loaf baked. So I will be cutting corners only at one part of the demonstration, then coming back to show you again what I did, just so that we can hopefully have a great end result. So what is sourdough? Sourdough is a naturally leavened bread. It's one of the world's most ancient forms of bread. Originally, the first evidence of people actually consuming sourdough is around 5000 BC or so in ancient Egypt. They've actually been able to calculate based off of yeast found in old tombs, especially preserved of royalty, and like actually bake sourdough from that So a naturally leavened bread is just the collection of wild yeast from the flowers. Flowers. That's really weird. From the flowers and the yeast in the air, because full disclaimer, yeasts are everywhere, whether or not we know it. And it's using that and feeding them so that they come and they eat all the sugars based off your flowers and in the air, and they release acetic acid, which is essentially vinegar, and they also release lactic acid. And so in a sourdough, we get this nice bubbly structure because all the yeasts are releasing carbon dioxide, which is trying to escape from the loaf, but the gluten in the bread captures it together, giving us this nice airy texture. And then we also get our lovely sour flavor from acetic acid because it's a byproduct of eating sugar. So sourdough is composed of two main parts. The starter right here, this is mine, her name's Dame Maggie Smith, after our beloved actress. And it's also composed of the actual bread and dough. So right now I'm just gonna walk you through a starter. A starter is just flour and water. That's all it is. And what you're doing is you are training this flour and this water mixture to come and consume wild yeast and to keep fermenting it. It's one of the easiest ferments you can do. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's like having a pet, or like a pet that you only have to feed once between every day to every 5 days. So there's a process to making a sourdough starter, and what you do, and I'll also send it, so what you do is on a daily basis, I'm gonna walk through this, is you take your sourdough starter. So I have mine, I'm gonna come here to the camera so you can see. You can tell it's active because it has a lot of small bubbles around. Another major component of an active starter is that you will see it literally rise up, even like double its size, and fall down throughout the day as it heats up and like the yeast eat a lot and then like it cools down. Another good way to know if your starter is active is to do the float test. That's when you take a piece of your starter, you set it in a glass of water, and then you go, and if it floats, it's an active starter. If it sinks, it's probably not that active. So the ways to obtain a starter, is like you can buy one online. There's lots of bakeries and like Kmart for Flour, for example, sells them. And what they do is they send you a dehydrated starter, and then you hydrate it with water and activate it. And then you start your process from there. You can get it from a friend, if you have a friend who makes sourdough and wants to send it, great. And then also you can just create your own. I'll be attaching steps to like this several day long process of just feeding it and getting it active. But the basics of sourdough is that you feed it every day. So what I do, can you actually grab me a bowl?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like a small one?
Mm-hmm. So what you do, you need three main components. You need flour, you need water, and you need a kitchen scale. Kitchen scales are also integral to sourdough making. So for my starter, I use a combination of both all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour. And we want to make sure that in all of our flour baking for sourdough that it's unbleached, because the bleaching process kills all the wild yeast on our flour, which is exactly what we don't want. We want them to consume it. So a basic process of feeding your starter is leaving only 30 grams of your original starter. So I normally use a kitchen scale and I write down the weight of my starter the previous day, and then I discard it. Sorry, I'm going to take a step real quick and get the bread in the oven so that we can have a great loaf. So I'll walk you through this real quick. This is the last hopping around. So This is another major component of sourdough making, is a Dutch oven or form of oven-ish enclosed baking space that can help you get a good rise. So here I have bread that I have had fermented overnight, and I'm just gonna lightly flour the surface. I've gotten really into just pouring it into this extremely hot Dutch oven. If you are adverse to hot things, please wear gloves. And I'm just going to score it real fast. I have this razor from a bread baking kit, but what I do is I just have it at a 45-degree angle. I don't know if you can see it, and then I just make a few cutting marks. So, okay, that has been scored, it's in the oven. I've made the mistake a few times of grabbing an extremely hot lid. Don't do it. Grab your lid and plop it back on. So this will be sitting in the oven for 25 minutes. After that, we will remove the lid so that it can brown. But the reason why we keep the lid on the Dutch oven is so that all this steam that wants to escape will have nowhere to go. It won't evaporate immediately. It'll force the bread to rise, and that's what we're looking for. So. Okay, back to starters. So, yes, we're going to discard our starter. The reason why we discard is that the yeast use a lot of active sugars. So we want to make sure that we're constantly feeding them, just like you and I, you know, can't live off of leftovers for 4 to 5 days in a row. So I'm going to just take my old starter and discard it. And so there are several things you can do with the discard. You can put it in your compost, or you can bake it like a cracker, or you can add it to several of your favorite baked goods. I'm also sending out a link to a website that has really good ideas, but like if you want sourdough flavored waffles with a little bit of that like lovely acidic taste, just put some of your old sourdough discard in there. It's delicious. You can do biscuits, baked goods, even like a buttermilk pound cake. Be so good. So I have my starter discarded. I'm gonna put it back on my kitchen scale. And for me, I like to use a combination of all-purpose and whole wheat flour. The all-purpose flour for me like adds a lot of structure. And the whole wheat provides more of those natural yeasts that we love. So I measure about 30 grams or 30 to 35 grams of both white flour and whole wheat. So, ooh, right on the money. And then now we're gonna go. And then, so yeah, I have, to reiterate, I have 35 grams of my starter in here, my old starter, 35 grams of my all-purpose flour, and 35 grams of my whole wheat flour. Great. And so now I've measured out 35 plus 35 is 70. So I measured out 70 grams of water, and we're just going to mix that in as well. So essentially, you can make your starter at whatever ratios you like. You can do 50 white, 50 whole wheat, and then you would do 100 grams of water. So and then you would do again another 50 grams of starter. So you really want like almost like a 1-to-1. So like, yes, math. So I'm gonna pour it in, and then that's it. All you're gonna do is you want to mix it really well. You just want to make sure that all the flour is thoroughly hydrated. And like sometimes depending on the day or the environment, it's a little more wet or a little more dry. And this is the fun part about sourdough is like, you can be extremely scientific, and I think consistency is great, but sometimes you'll just have to adjust. And that just comes from a lot of experience, and it's something I've been learning a lot. When I first moved back here after break, I had a few loaves that just did not go well because I wasn't used to the environment. So just did a little bit more experimenting. So our starter is mixed. You might see a few bubbles here or there, but in the next 3 to 5 hours, you'll see a lot more activity as the starter gets going and active. and it's really fun to see. So yeah, this is a big component of making sourdough. It's what gives it its leavening, it's its agent, it gives it its unique flavor. So now we are going into getting started our actual bread. I'm just gonna walk you through a little bit of the equipment that you'll need, and the ingredients, and then yeah, we'll go through all the steps. So first thing that we'll need is a kitchen scale. These are pretty inexpensive. They're found relatively in any store whatsoever. And the reason why we use a kitchen scale is that flours are not all created equal. A white flour like this, an AP flour, is lighter than a whole wheat flour. So like when I measure it with a measuring cup, like the densities are not the same at all, especially when we calculate water percentages. Also, again, like with measuring cups, they're not as accurate as the way we read it. The way that I measure a cup of flour is different how you measure a cup of flour. So you're gonna have like very inconsistent results with that. So that's something to consider. Second of all, if you're adverse to mixing with your hands for like, I feel like a makeup tutorial artist. If you're adverse to mixing with your hands for a few steps, a wooden spoon's great. I'm gonna be using one just so I'm not going back and forth to the sink all the time to rub stuff off. I have a bread basket. So you're gonna need a few big bowls, or actually only one big bowl. That's mainly just to do the bulk of your baking. I like to use these bench knives and a bench scraper. This is really cheap. I got it for $5 at Target. It's very useful in both it has like a measuring tool and it can cut through different pastries. This is really helpful in shaping and cutting. And then a bench scraper or a bowl scraper is just a plastic material like this. It's not necessary, but again, it helps scrape your stuff off. I got it actually from a bread making kit on the internet. This is called a banneton or a bread proofing basket. So like it's not necessary to have. It's just a basket, and then you can remove the fabric covering off and also just use the lines on the basket to proof your bread. But it helps shape your bread, and it's a nice container that you don't need to like wash or be cognizant of when you're using other bowls. But if you don't have one of these, you could use a bowl that you have and just line it with kitchen towels that are heavily dusted. And I'll explain more what we use this for later. Otherwise, the only other thing you need is a Dutch oven or a Dutch oven setup. There are Lodge combo cookers, which are great because they're only $30 and they give you 2 different types of pans that you can use for daily cooking. Plus you can also use it as a Dutch oven. You can also use like a big pot that you can bake in, like a baking sheet over, and make a modified version. I also, with this kit that I have this razor blade. This is to score bread. It's really nice for me because it's long handled, so I don't have to get really close to the pot and accidentally burn myself. But you know, also like a nice sharp paring knife or regular knife works just as well. So I think that's equipment. Ingredients again are the same thing as our starter, as our leaven. All-purpose flour, whole wheat flour, and I use also a combination of bread flour. Bread flour provides a little bit more structure and helps you build up that gluten content. Again, these are all should be unbleached. We want those active yeasts again, and they're all relatively well priced, store-bought. Most grocery stores sell their own versions of unbleached flours. They're very affordable. You don't need to break the bank and go get your $20 bag of like hand ground artisan flour, unless that's what you want to do. That's also great. So, and then what else? Only other ingredients you need are water and some sea salt or regular salt. I use kosher because yeah, bread, like, oh, I love bread because it is naturally gluten-free, or not gluten-free, vegan. It's not gluten-free. Do not serve this to your gluten-free friends. Great. So now we are getting on to our first steps. So our first step is making our leaven. Leaven is just essentially you take your starter, and I've made the premix here, but I have my starter on the bottom. Here I use 45 grams of my starter, 45 grams of wheat flour, and 45 grams of all-purpose flour. And then you mix it with 90 grams of water. And the purpose of a leaven is, first of all, you don't want to use all your sourdough starter when you're making bread, because if you could, but then you'd have to wait a whole another 7 days to create a brand new mature starter. And so we want to have something that we can use, but we can use over and over again. So making a leaven is like making a mini, quick, fast-acting starter. The purpose of the leaven is to activate the yeast and create like a spongy mix that will help the rest of our bread create its characteristic rise. So what you do when you're making bread, and again, so I haven't mentioned this, but this is a recipe that I first learned to use how to make sourdough. So I've adapted it slightly for here. But this is adapted from a chef called Joshua Wiseman. So yeah, again, we want to follow the same steps of mixing our starter, our flours, our water all together so that it's a nice cohesive paste-like texture. It's really thick, really gooey, and so it's going to look like this. So what you do when you have your leaven mixed is you typically mix it 5 to 6 hours before you start your bread. So I'd recommend for your first few times to bake bread on the weekends, like on a Saturday and Sunday process. And also, since everyone's staying at home because of quarantine, it's nice, or like a rainy day, you know, spring showers are coming. It's nice to have an all-day project. If you do work full-time, I have included in the resources that will be sent out a full-time working schedule. But yeah, so I typically do this in the morning. So I will get up on Saturday morning, you know, if I get up around 8, I'll put this in my oven or a warm place. Sometimes the top of your fridge is really warm, or near like your sink or your microwave. It's pretty drafty in this house, so it's nice to keep it in a warm environment. I'll put this in the oven with like a loose fitting lid. You don't want to tighten your lid because even though it's pretty unlikely that your glass will explode, you don't want to take that chance. It's going to be releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. We don't want the pressure to build up. So it'll sit for 5 to 6 hours, and I'm going to show you a mature version right now. Yeah. So, well, I'll come back here again for purpose's sake, but you'll kind of see that there is a big height difference here. Maybe not as much as before, but this one's quite airy and light. There's a lot of small air bubbles all around it. That shows that it's very active. And it's been sitting for about 5 hours. So this is what you're going to use then to make your bread. So the next part is our autolyse. Yes. So, oh, can I have one more bowl? Sorry. Okay. So an autolyse is the part where you, a big bowl, sorry. The autolyse is the part where you mix your flour and your water together. And this is a crucial step because what it's going to do is it's going to relax the gluten. It's going to make your dough and your water hydrated so that like when you add in your leaven and your salt, it's going to absorb a lot more easily and become more cohesive because this is a no-knead dough. So it's a great opportunity for us to get that going. So I'm going to make a mini version of an autolyse. I have a full-size one ready to show you guys, but I will give you the full-size ingredients. So we're going to do 500 grams of all-purpose flour. Again, that's 500 grams. And then we're gonna do 273 grams of bread flour. Remember to tare your scale after every time. I've had a few mistakes where I've been like, oh my gosh, I do not know how much I put in there, but it's okay. It's a very flexible bread. So, great. And again, this recipe, I also forgot to mention, makes 2 loaves of bread. So you have 2 whole loaves. It's a lot of flour, but you get 2 great, decent sized loaves. And then we have 175 grams of whole wheat flour. All right, so our mini version is here. And then this is where I recommend that if you're adverse to touching things with your hands or getting some sticky dough, you can use a wooden spoon. I will be, just so I'm not bouncing all over the sink, but you want to mix your flours first to make sure that they're well incorporated and evenly distributed. And then you're going to add 660 grams of water until it forms a shaggy dough. So what we're looking for is something that like could take a little bit more water, or you think it could take a little bit more water, but it is relatively well hydrated. For all of you sourdough nerds out there, we're making about a 72% hydration dough, which just means that our ratio of water to flour is 72%. And when you're making bread, the lower your hydration, the easier it is to work with. But as you get more comfortable with it, you can up it and try out a few new techniques. So I just mixed in our flour and our water. It's shaggy, it's a little bit pasty. There's a few dry clumps on the side or not completely incorporated, but that's okay because we're going to put it in our warm place for 30 minutes. So you want to do this about 30 minutes before your leaven's ready to go. And you keep it in the warm place so that both your leaven and your autolyse are at the same temperature. And this will help incorporate things, make sure that the yeasts are all nice and happy. So I have an autolyse that is done right here. Thank you. So this is our full-size autolyse right here. It is kind of shaggy. It hasn't really moved a lot, but compared to when I first started with it, it's very well thoroughly hydrated. It's nice and warm. So the next part after your dough making is, well, after your autolyse, is to make your dough. So I have 18 grams of sea salt. We have our leaven, and then you just need a bowl of water. And you could use any water for your sourdough. Some people are purists, they're like, you only use distilled or extremely filtered water, or we have spring water, so that's what I use here. But if you have tap water, that's totally great, as long as it's not like super like full of chemicals. But I think I've had marvelous results with tap water. It's been great. So what you're gonna do is sprinkle your all over your dough right here. And then what I like to do is take a rubber spatula and then just pour your leaven all over your dough and scrape it out. That's the nice thing too about making your leaven recipe separate, is like you always have the perfect amount of leaven for your sourdough. Never have to measure it out. Takes away one step. Cool. And the bowl of water has two reasons. First of all, it helps hydrate the dough even more. And second of all, it keeps your hands from sticking to the dough, which is really nice. So what I do is I wet my hand and I use it to spread the leaven all over the surface of the dough right here. And then sometimes I'll just go a little crazy and just like take a few splashes, make sure that it's nice and damp. And then I'm just gonna use this pinching motion and gonna try and incorporate this leaven. You're gonna get some interesting sounds. It's fun, it's like playing with Play-Doh. You're gonna just like pinch and twist it all over. Don't be afraid to mix the dough. This is a nice one too, because like you really can't over knead it because it's a no knead dough. We'll do a folding to get that going, but you don't need to worry about working it too much. And if you come to some dry places, you're like, oh, this needs a little bit more water, or my hand is sticking too much to the dough, just add more water. It's gonna be great. So once you feel like that's kind of been thoroughly incorporated, I like to use a method just for peace of mind called the Rhubarb Method. It's essentially slapping the dough against the side of the bowl. You're just gonna wanna like cup your hand, move it against the side. What this does too is, again, help ensure that it's evenly distributed, that your water has been put in the same place. And you wanna do this for like 3 to 5 minutes. It'll get smoother, it'll get a little bit more elastic. You don't need to do a lot of other techniques like to slap and fold or a few other things. It works just as well. And plus it's a great bicep workout, by the way. If you can't go to the gym, gosh, your arms are gonna be looking great. So, all right, I'm gonna do this. How are you looking on the bread?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, wonderful. So 5 minutes to take the lid off. So, okay, let's see. This is great. So yeah, I'm just gonna reiterate what we did so far. We had made our starter, or looked at what our starter is. We made our leaven, and we let that, on the day of our bake, we would let it rise 4 to 5 hours, or 5 to 6 hours, depending on when we want to get our baking started. We made our auto leaves, which is just our mixture of water and dough, and all that is going to help hydrate it. And then we added, after 30 minutes, we added our salt. We added 18 grams of salt. And then we added splashes of water and kept our hands so that makes it nice and damp. And we added our leaven. So now the dough has all the elements that it needs to rise and get bubbly and start fermenting. And then all we did was mix it in, like made sure that it was all going around. So what I would do normally then is just take the dough, cover it with a damp kitchen towel, and put it in that same warm place that you were putting your leaven. We want to relax the dough. We want it to rest. We want to make sure that the gluten has a chance to kind of untangle and unfold. So, does anyone have any questions at this time?
Someone said, I have seen some instructions where the auto leaves includes the leaven. Are there pros or cons to be aware of? Or have you seen that before?
I have seen that before. I think it's just personal preference. Eventually the auto leaves and the leaven come together, but there is like also a myriad number of ways to create sourdough. Some people do like a method where they like to get it all in. And some people, like, they make the whole auto leaves and leaven together, and it just takes a longer time to ferment because it's a greater volume of ingredients. So it's up to you and your schedule, really. Once you figure out what you like and your schedule, you can kind of create whatever you want.
Okay, and someone else asked, is there a maximum number of hours after which you should not use the leaven and you should toss it out after a certain
That's a good idea. That's the same things that you should look for your sourdough as well. I would say that you don't want to use your leaven when it starts to fall back down again. You can kind of see on the side of the jar, it'll be like really, really high and bubbly when you take it out. I've let my leavens fall a little bit, and like all I will say is I don't get as great of a rise on my bread. And if I'm kind of scared towards the end that like my leaven's rising too fast and I haven't scheduled out my life to accommodate that, I will take it out of its warm place and put it in a cooler place, and that'll just slow down the fermentation. So, but if like your leaven's dead or even your sourdough is dead, what you'll see is like a line of liquid that's like kind of grayish that's like pooling around the top. as the water and flour are starting to separate. Also, any signs of mold, especially on your starter, just throw it out. We don't want to be dealing with that, even if it's benign. It's just better safe than sorry. But yeah, with a lot of constant vigilance, you don't have to worry about that. I will say on terms of sourdough starting, once I have established it, I feed my sourdough starter every 2 to 3 days. Now that I've established it, it's eating, and that helps develop the sour flavor the less that you feed it. But also, again, I only bake bread once a week. I don't have time every day to like feed it in the morning, rush down to the farm, get everything going. So what I like to do is actually I keep my sourdough starter in the fridge. I'll feed it on a Monday, and then if I want to bake or start baking on a Friday, I'll take it out Thursday in the morning, let it come to room temperature, and then I'll feed it one more time. And what that will do is activate it again, get it nice and bubbly, and then I'm ready to go on Friday. So, and like you can keep it in as long as like almost 2 weeks. You would just have to do a few active feedings at room temperature. But the fridge is your best friend also when you're making sourdough and you need to just slow things down. If you have a quick errand or you didn't accommodate for a certain timing, it'll just slow the fermentation down exponentially, which is very, very useful.
We only have a few seconds left. There were 2 more questions, but we'll get to those at the end.
Okay, great. So yeah, now we'll go back to baking for 1 moment. The second part of the bake is we've had our bread in the Dutch oven. It's been baking at 500 degrees for 25 minutes. So the next part is I'm going to remove the lid, and then I'm going to turn the temperature down to 475 degrees. The ovens here at AMI run really hot, so we're going to bake it for 13 minutes and check on it and see what's going on. Typically, I bake it anywhere from 15 to 18, but you know your oven. You'll smell it. It'll be amazing. So I'm just going to move temperature down. Remove the lid. Oh boy, we have a great rise for you. Wow. All right, I can't wait to show you when it's ready. So, okay. Next step, we've mixed in our auto lees. We've let it rest for a minute. Now we come to folding. Folding is my favorite thing because I don't need to knead it. I just do a few motions and it's ready to go. So when you fold your dough, at first it's gonna look like this. It's gonna be this like shaggy kind of lumpy mess. And you're like, oh, this is interesting looking. It doesn't look like bread. Don't discard your water that you were using. Just gonna wet your hand again. This keeps it from sticking. It adds a little bit extra hydration, but we're not going wild. You're not gonna be dealing with like pancake batter. So what I like to do is I take my bread from the end of one side and then I pull it as far as I can and I place it over to the other side. And then I move the next adjacent side. I grab it and pull it over. And you're gonna repeat that around the perimeter of the bread. Typically, I get between 4 and 5 folds over. And what this does is it's like a low effort form of kneading. It helps develop the gluten. It stretches out those proteins, but it also is just helps shape it. Because again, our yeast in our lemon is doing so much work. We just want to help it around. So what you're gonna do is once you get all your folds in, you're gonna have this nice domed little piece of bread. Maybe I'll bring it closer. It's very important to me that you see this. So see, it's kind of tucked in. It looks almost like a dumpling in a way, like a bread dumpling. So this will go and I will let it sit for 15 minutes the first time. I'm going to cover it again with our damp towel and we're going to let it rest. And the nice thing about sourdough is that you can add as many folds as you want. I don't recommend going more than 6, but for the sake of this recipe, I have you doing this 2 times for 15 minutes. We just did 1, then we would let it rest for 15 minutes, do another set of folds, and then we'd let it rest for 30 minutes and do our final set of folds. Again, this just helps develop the gluten. And what you'll see is as you keep doing it, the dough gets more and more elastic. So that's really an exciting thing. And then after we have our final sets of folds, we do what we call the bulk rise. And this is just like any other form of bread making. You're going to want to have it relax. It's going to keep working out all that gluten, and it's going to keep relaxing. All those yeasts are going to keep fermenting, and we're going to have a dough that it's doubled in size and really bubbly. So let me show you an example of that right now. Thank you, Jamie. So this is some bread that I have let bulk rise. And as you can see right here, it's doubled in size. Like, look, I just folded worth of bread, but now it's extremely tall. It's kind of pulling away from the sides a little bit. We have all these fun bubbles here, which says that it's active, it's moving, it has a bit of a wobble. So these are all signs that you want to look for when you're making your bread. If it's not doing this, if it's a little small, it's a little flat, keep it in longer. And if not, pull it out. And again, if you're scared of it getting too big too fast, take it out, put it in a cool place, or put it in your fridge. The bulk rise is a big step. It typically takes, after you finish your folds, about 2 hours to get to this stage. So it's a nice time just to relax, forget about your bread, and that's so much fun. So we've gotten to the end of our bulk rise stage, and we're going to start shaping our bread. We're getting ready for the big finale, the overnight ferment, the second big finale, I guess. So I like to do is just scrape this dough all onto the bench with a bench scraper. You can use any surface to work with bread here as long as it's clean. Whatever's on your surface is gonna go on your bread. So that's on you for whatever you want in there. All right, so we have this big Colossus mass. It looks like the Blob or something from like a sci-fi film. Woo, look at it. Thank you.
You might want to move the bread, I mean the flour.
Yeah, we're gonna move this so that you guys can see a little bit more. So we have this giant colossal bread. I'm going to use my bench knife to cut it in half. You can use a regular sharp cooking knife, any sharp object that you like. I typically like to just like rub it in a little bit of water because it helps to prevent it from sticking too much. So first what we're gonna do is pre-shape our bread. What this does is give our bread the general idea of what it wants to be. We want it to be in rounds because I have a round basket and most bowls, again, are round. So we want to give it this idea of what it wants to be. So what you want to do, I'm just gonna scoot these by a little bit. Hooray. What you want to do is take your bench knife, or if you have like a regular knife or any sort of like flat object, you want to take it and like go underneath the bread and just kind of use your hands and your knife to shape it into a general idea of a round. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to splay out. It's going to go all over the place. So don't worry if it's not like extremely tight or extremely like you're like, oh, this is a perfect circle. Don't worry about it. This I would say is great. I'm going to do this one more time on this loaf. So I'm going to turn it. And I typically do about quarter turns. And I kind of use my hand and my knife and the tension of my work surface to guide my shaping. Great, so we have two lovely rounds right here. And what you will do then is just let them sit for about 25 minutes or so. It's gonna let it relax. It's gonna also dry out the surface a bit so that when you go into your next step, it's not super sticky. And I think we are on our way to that. So this is the final shaping. I have a round that I have already pre-shaped for you guys today. I'm gonna move him over here. And again, it's kind of this like idea of a circle, not quite. So this is the final shaping. This is what we want to put into our bowl, into our bread basket, or banneton is another word for them. And what this is going to do is just help maintain the shape and the tension that will, when it's fermenting in the fridge, will hold. So when we bake it, you're gonna have this great, beautiful rise. So I like to dust it lightly with flour. You just want like the slightest hint of flour. It doesn't need to be covered that much. And then rub it all over the surface. Some of the bubbles will pop, which you'll feel like it's like, oh, this is really sad, but it's okay. It's how we move it. So again, you're gonna use a flat object, your bench knife. I kind of like to loosen it underneath all the sides. And this is probably the most complicated part, so some more instructions, but we turn it upside down. So this floured side that we did on top is on the bottom, and that again prevents it from sticking, prevents us from getting too much of a mess. So we're gonna do, it's essentially like an envelope fold. Could you tilt the screen down a little bit? Yeah. So, yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the bottom of this bread, it's really loose and wiggly. I'm gonna bring it to the middle of the round. Then I'm gonna take the left side or the right side, just depends on what side you wanna start with, and move it in towards the middle and pat it in. And you'll see here, it's really sticky, so you have a nice natural seal. And I'm gonna take the right side and move it all the way over the left. So we have this nice complete fold. And then to seal our envelope, I'm gonna take the top and bring it and stretch it all the way down to the bottom. So we have this neat little package here. You can sometimes roll it over. Sometimes I like to use the knife to help guide me and put that seam on the bottom. So then this is the shaping part. We wanna have a surface, again, that's clean, not a ton of flour, because we're gonna use the tension from the surface and from our hands to shape it into a boule or like a tight ball. So I'm gonna take my hands and let my pinky fingers kind of guide me here. And I'm just gonna start turning it. And you'll see like a few bubbles are gonna start popping up again as the tension arises. And you're going to get this nice little ball. It's gonna be like kind of jiggly, a little bouncy. It's great. My first few boules were terrible, like absolute trash. But again, it still works out great. So now this is the final step before this would, in theory, go into the fridge, is I have my bread basket. I have a linen liner on it. Again, for me, it's nice because it just plops out and releases the bread. You just have to make sure, if you don't want to use a linen liner, totally fine. Just make sure that the wooden surface is floured completely. And again, if you don't have specialty bowls, that is also great too. Just take like a nice bowl, kitchen bowl that you have, take some clean kitchen towels, maybe not your best kitchen towels, and just flour them heavily with flour. Do you mind handing me some flour as we talk about that? So just gonna take flour here. And then this is the part where you have to think upside down. Kind of like we're in Stranger Things. So I have my surface nice and floured, and this is gonna help on the top so it doesn't stick to the surface. And I'm going to take my bench knife or my hands, lift up my boule, and I'm going to turn it upside down. So this top is going to face the bottom of the bowl right here. So this lovely seam that we made, you can kind of see here on the bottom is now our top, because when we put it in our Dutch oven, we're gonna flip it up one more time. So this will be the bottom yet again. So yay, this is our boule. This is what is then gonna sit in the fridge overnight. You can let it ferment for anywhere from 14 to like 22 hours. The longer it sits in the fridge, the more it kind of develops like a nuanced, complex flavor. But I also like to do it, like I'll go to bed, I'll wake up in the morning on Sunday, like a nice lazy morning, and then I'll come and make my bread. So what I do is I stick it in the fridge with a damp towel and that helps prevent the top from drying out. You can also use plastic wrap if you want, it works just as well, or even put it in like a clean grocery bag and just maintain the air. So this will go and it'll sit in the fridge and ferment overnight. So
we're just about to take the bread out.
All right, and we're just about to take the bread out. So everything's getting really exciting now. And I will, well, let me get this first.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh my, we have a winner. So, I don't know if you can, so we just turned that bowl that we let ferment overnight into this gorgeous loaf of bread. It is, wow, so pretty. So what I did again is in the morning, I will get up about 45, you can do like anywhere between an hour and 30 minutes before you want to bake the bread. You turn your oven on to 500 degrees Fahrenheit and you put your Dutch oven or your Dutch oven like thing, whether it's like a pot with like a pan lid over it or your combo cooker, and you're gonna let it go from the cold to hot. So it's gonna get really, really hot at 500 degrees. And again, we're doing this because we wanna create an environment that forces the steam to escape and it forces the bread to rise. So like I started with a bowl that was only about like this high and now we're all the way up here. So again, we put it in the oven for 500 degrees. When I was ready to bake, I took out the Dutch oven, we took the lid off, and we made sure we had our mitts on the whole time. I'm saying this, I know it's stupid, but burned myself a few times and it's not fun. So we took the lid off and we took our bread out of the fridge. I dusted the surface of the top surface of the bread with a little bit of flour. Again, this prevents sticking in the pan. And I turned it into the Dutch oven. If you're a little bit like, I don't want to score in the Dutch oven, which is totally valid, you can take it, flour a little bit of your clean work surface, put your bread onto the clean work surface, you can score it, and then you can put it, use your knife or a helper in your hand to put it into your Dutch oven. We then put our lid on top to create the sealed environment. We put it in our oven for 25 minutes at 500 degrees. About 25 minutes after the baking stopped, or after we've had it at 500 degrees, we took the lid off and turned the temperature down to 475 degrees. And what this does is it helps create a lot of color because we've gotten the rise from all this lovely carbon dioxide that tried to escape. We got this beautiful rise, but now we want this lovely color because it adds a lot of flavor and dimension and gives you that crust that everyone loves. And so we baked it for 13 minutes, but you'll be able to check and see in your oven. You can turn your oven light on, or you can just open it up a crack, see if it's the color that you want. And at the end of it, you got this lovely loaf. Pull it out with your hands, and then just put it on a wire rack to cool. And what that will do is you want a wire rack because you want the airflow circulation to help develop the crust. And the best part about fresh baked bread is like, A, you have fresh baked bread. You made this, you know? But also you get to like listen to the sound of the crust forming. It's like from that Ratatouille movie, like the symphony of crackle. And it's so true. It is lovely. So here's your bread. I know this was a whirlwind and this was like, oh my gosh, we went from 0 to hero in less than an hour. So I am going to be attaching both the bread recipe, this is being recorded, and I have attached several different resources that have bread variants and that can walk you through the steps again, as well as books. But yeah, so do we have any more questions?
Yeah, there are a few questions from earlier that I'll bring back in. Someone asked to repeat the name of that mixing method you did where you slapped it across the bowl.
Yeah, so that's called the Rhubarb Method. It's R-U-B-A-U-D method. It's not rhubarb. I learned that. Rhubarb.
Okay, and someone asks, must the starter be kept in a glass container?
No, you can do any form of like food safe grade plastic, even like metal. As long as it's food grade safe, it's great. I like to keep it in glass Sometimes it's nice just to watch the rise and fall, but no, it doesn't matter.
Okay. And someone said they have a sourdough starter that someone gave them in a small glass container. She's kept it in her fridge and it's been a few months. Can she revive it or should she toss it?
Interesting. I would say I would give it the smell test if you're looking to revive your starter. If it has like a pleasant sour smell and you're like kind of like, oh, but then you're like, oh, this is nice. It's probably okay, but if the liquid has started to separate and it's kind of like a grayish, greenish look, I would just toss it. The fact of the matter is it's probably like the yeasts have been pretty starved for a while, but there's always hope. Again, if you're like on the fringe of it and you're like, oh my gosh, I think my starter's about to die, just keep feeding it. Just bring it back. It just needs to get into the practice.
Okay. And can the final rise be done out of the fridge? If so, for how long?
Yes, great question. The final rise can be done out of the fridge. If you want to do it the day of, you can wait about 2.5 hours after you shape it into your rolls and then let that relax. The only difference is like you'll still have a great tasting, amazing bread. It just won't be as slightly as complex. I also like to use the fridge for convenience for my schedule, but yeah, you'll have a wonderful yeasted sourdough.
Okay, someone said, if you want to add herbs to the dough, at what point would you do that?
Oh, good question. I would do it when you're mixing your leaven and your auto lees together, just to make sure that it is all well combined. If you're going to do like seeds or nuts on the top, like on your crust, I would wait till you do your final shapings.
Awesome. And I'll give it a few minutes, see if any other questions come in, but so far everyone's been saying thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you. This is really fun. I'm excited. Again, it's been a newbie, but this has been something that's been like keeping me grounded here every single week. I will say, if you get into the zone like I have and have been baking every single week, just Jamie and I live here on this mountain. So 2 people can't really consume 4 to 6 loaves of bread a week. I wish I could, but I don't live near Panera and I don't make enough soup to make my own bread bowls every day. So what I like to do is slice my bread and I put it in a gallon Ziploc container and I just squeeze out the air and I put it in my freezer. So whenever I want a slice of bread and I'm afraid of it going to stale, I just take out a slice, I put it in the toaster, and it brings it back to life. That's a great way to have bread in case you're worrying about like, oh my gosh, this is really stale. Also, if it is super stale, make your own breadcrumbs. You know, take them, you can tear them up and make it rustic. You could put it in a food processor with a little bit of salt and like whatever seasonings you want. You can make croutons. There's a lot of uses. Oh my gosh, I've been into French toast lately. Lots and lots of French toast because our chickens have been laying like crazy. So yeah, there's a lot of methods. So don't be afraid of getting creative with the uses for bread. Yeah, and I would just like to say, like, if you have any questions, I've been really excited to teach you. I know it was a lot. My email is Hannah, HANNAH, @AMIfellows.org. And so feel free to email me with any questions that I have or that you have. I'd be happy to answer them as best as I can or direct you to a source who's way more knowledgeable than I am. But yeah,
For them.
Great. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Any other?
Someone did ask, is the bread too hot to cut now?
Oh, actually, let's do a taste. Yeah, let's do a test. I would
someone
say
said they wanted to see the test.
Yeah, I would say that I would avoid cutting your bread for about 15 to 30 minutes before it's really done. And that's just because it's still cooking a bit on the inside. It's still forming a structure, but we're also going to eat this bread for dinner right now. So I think it sounds good.
Also, you know, we do have the one that you made.
Yeah, and I do have the other sample one that Jamie will get as well. Okay, great. So let's see how we're doing. Oh yeah, she's just slightly warm. And watch your fingers as well. These are big breads. Oh my. Ta-da! Look at that steam. Couldn't ask for anything better. So Yeah, in an hour we've made a whole loaf. Oop. And then yeah, this is another one that I baked yesterday. Slightly more irregular air holes, but every loaf is different. So it's like a new pet. Yeah, and this is by far one of the easiest methods and timings that I have encountered. If you want to take it up a notch, there's different times that you can, there's more folds that you can do. There's different timings that you can do. There's different ratios of wheat to whole wheat, like wheat to all-purpose, to bread flour that you can do to suit your tastes. Again, it's just like the more you add whole wheat, the more that like water you have to add because it's a lot denser flour. But yeah, I wish you guys could eat it. So.
Awesome. Can you mute?
Awesome. So that brings us to time. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to Hannah and Jamie. And again, if there are any questions, please email us. I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, and that will contain a link to the recording, which we posted on YouTube, and the resources that Hannah was mentioning, and also the recipe. And again, please check our website for future workshops, events, and donations. Our workshops are free and open to the public. Donations and community support make this possible. If you are able, please consider making a donation at our website, amifellows.org. And as Hannah mentioned, the Farm and Food System Fellowship deadline is tomorrow. So if anyone's interested or knows someone who may be interested, please check out our website and our social media pages for more information. And we hope to see you at future workshops. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.